important for people in crisis situations to have good communication as well. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different components of crisis communications. Depending on your role with your organization, it can vary depending on what position you'll play in a crisis, but the playbook is pretty much the same, and it's great for everyone in your organization to be on the same page. So the first thing we'll talk about is what actually defines a crisis. And I think this is really the most important, probably fundamental thing to understand. You know, what defines a crisis is there's a victim. So people, animals, the planet, or the environment. And it's different than, you know, an anecdotal situation, like say your organization had a really negative review in the press. While some people at your organization and yourself may feel like that's a crisis, that's more of an anecdotal situation than an actual crisis that impacts people's lives. Some examples of a crisis could be a wildfire, which we are very familiar with here in Southwest Colorado. Also loss of life, embezzlement at a company, some things like that are higher level incidences that can occur. And so the other thing that's really important to keep in mind is that your organization will be judged on how you handle that victim dimension of the crisis. So, hoping that it will just go away, not addressing it, not telling the truth, all of those things can really blow back on your organization in a negative way and make the crisis response prolonged. Handling it appropriately from the beginning really will help set you up for a strong recovery and more of a seamless transition from once the crisis subsides. So that being said, some best practices. So pre-crisis, before anything happens, it's really a great idea to think about the potential scenarios that could impact your business. So if you operate a ski resort, for example, someone could fall off of a lift, there could be an accident, anticipating what those potential scenarios that could impact your business specifically, and then coming up with a plan to respond. Your plan is, since you can't anticipate everything that will occur in an incident, it's meant to kind of be more of a guide and less of a playbook, because you'll have to define that once a crisis actually erupts and as you're going forward. Your crisis management team, who on your team at your organization is going to work through the crisis. So during the 416 fire, when I was with Visit Durango, that was myself, our social media manager, and the marketing director. We were identified as the team. So as soon as on June 1st, the fire started up north, the three of us met and then went to some folks outside of our team, the Colorado Tourism Office, which oversees tourism marketing and management for the state, was a really important go-to resource for us as we were representing the tourism industry through that crisis. And obviously, during the month of June, tourism in Colorado was one industry that was particularly impacted by that particular situation. And so the first thing that we did on Friday was we met, and then we reached out to the Colorado Tourism Office to get some guidance and support. So identifying who are those people in your industry, maybe outside of your organization, that would participate and support you through the situation. You always, in a crisis, where as the tourism office obviously did not take the lead for the 416 fire. We looked to La Plata County. Since the fire was in the county, it was being managed by the county along with the fire officials and people definitely above our pay grade in crisis management. And we basically just took our marching orders from them. And it's really important to find those officials who are in charge during a crisis to get the most accurate, up-to-date information. While news channels, the Durango Herald, typically also get their information from those same sources, it's really important that you default to the officials and the authorities versus getting your information even from the newspaper, because sometimes, you know, those facts can be confused. So I always default to who's in charge during those situations, get the information from them. And then, like I said, as you anticipate, what are those scenarios that could potentially impact your organization, drafting some crisis messaging. So, you know, someone falls off the lift or gets hurt at the ski resort, you have kind of a drafted script in place that you can update when the time comes to actually pull that messaging out and have to use it. And that's just a great practice to save time. So a lot of times with crises, you don't expect them. They come out of the blue, and you have to respond quickly and act quickly. And so having this plan and this messaging in place ahead of time is really going to set you up and give you a leg up in that response. And then it's a great idea to meet with your team annually to review your crisis plan and see what might need to be updated. You know, it's a great idea to practice how you would respond during a time like this when we're all, you know, confined to stay-at-home orders and stuck at home. This is a great time to dust off your crisis plan and review that and make any adjustments. You'd also want to do the same thing after a crisis. So pulling out your plan, looking back at what worked well, what didn't work so well, what you could do to improve next time. So your crisis plan checklist is right here, and I will provide this deck to everyone after the call, but basically sort of reiterating what I just went through in the previous slide. Who's your crisis team? What are the resources that you need? So example of resource could be a contact list. Who are the people on your contact list, whether it's your customers, whether it's organizations and community leaders that you need to be contacting throughout the crisis. So having your contact list, your pre-drafted messaging, having a separate plan for how you'll respond to the news media versus your social media response. And the good thing to keep in mind about those two different audiences is you're speaking through a third party when you're speaking to the media. So you may be called on to conduct an interview with the news media, and you would have your talking points, you know, specific to that audience versus your social media audience, which is more of that direct to consumer channel where you take out the middleman, that is the news media, and you're speaking directly to consumers, customers, and other constituents who follow you on social media. San Juan Basin Public Health, their social media channel right now is a really great example of using that channel to speak directly with people. They're constantly in there responding to questions and posting updates every day with new case count information, both for the county and for the state. During the fire, on the tourism side of things, we had a lot of tourism attractions and activities that were impacted by closures. So each day we would send out a notification via email to all of our industry partners to let them know what size the fire is today, how much it had grown, what was closed, whether it was the highway, the train, purgatory. At one point we had all of the open space, city parks, and even the San Juan National Forest closed at one point. So each day we would go out and let people know, you know, what closures were impacting tourism. If it was time to, you know, stop promoting visitation to Durango, like we're doing right now with COVID during the fire, you know, we look to the highest levels of state government and for advice and guidance, because it's this fine line of, we have smoke in town in the mornings. Is it safe for people to travel here? And at the time, Governor Hickenlooper assured us that because the fire was 13 miles away, it was still safe for people to visit. But we made sure that we communicated what the air quality was like here in the mornings, letting people know not to recreate outside. And if you are at the of the at-risk population, that being anyone with asthma, lung conditions, the very old, the very young, to avoid, you know, being outside during those smoky times, and potentially even avoid visiting an area that's being impacted by wildfire smoke. The integration of emergency procedures. This is really important. Again, looking to those authorities, who's in charge, who's calling the shots. Right now, we're looking to San Juan Basin Public Health until it's safe for people to reopen the city, reopen our restaurants, and invite tourists back. So that is not our call to make, and we must integrate what San Juan Basin Public Health is doing into our response. And coordinating with partners. I mentioned the Colorado Tourism Office for us with Visit Durango being a really important resource. So I encourage you to think about, for your organization, who are those partners? Whether if you're dealing with restaurants right now, the Colorado Restaurant Association and organizations like that that work to support your industry can be a huge benefit during a time like this. So a lot of times we'll see with crisis communications, organizations will just say no comment and think that will let the media, run with the story or not. And no comment, ignoring the media, pretty basic, won't make them go away. It actually really kind of implies to the media that you are, if there's something controversial that they're asking you, saying no comment will honestly act as admission of guilt to reporters. And then they'll take the story that they want to tell if you don't tell your side of it. So that's pretty obvious. Not presenting a spokesperson makes everyone else a spokesperson. So we're seeing this on social media right now with the COVID situation. We have these armchair quarterbacks who are out there, that are not managing the situation, maybe don't understand everything that's involved in dealing with and managing an emergency like this, and think they have all the answers. And they can be very loud, and they can get a lot of people to listen to them and cause a lot of disruption. So having that spokesperson for your organization and putting them out there out front is really important. And then these are just some suggestions rather than no comment of what you can say. So I don't have the information I can confirm right now. And that's a big hurdle with crisis communications, is that we don't always have the information to be able to get out there with our spokesperson and respond. And that can be really challenging because the media, and we see this all the time with the Durango Herald, they want to know right now. They're aware of the situation, even though maybe it hasn't been made public to everyone yet, and they're clamoring for an answer. But until you have all of that information from the proper authorities and channels, it's really premature to get out there with your message. So some of this verbiage that I provided here can buy you some time and give you some options rather than saying no comment. And you need to, we have to respect people's privacy. So oftentimes if there's an accident at a ski resort, for example, people want to know, the press want to know who it was. And clearly, we cannot share that. That's private information. So these are just some statements that can help that can help in lieu of saying no comment. And then this is a by time statement. So again, when you don't have all of the information, but people are clamoring for answers, this is just a very simple statement that can buy you some time. And like I said, I'll share this with everyone so that you have it. But you can confirm there's been an incident, but you don't have the details. You can give any minimal details that have been confirmed. Yes, there was an accident. No, we don't. No, we can't tell you the person's name or condition that they're in. Once we have the information, we'll be back in touch with our spokesperson and then providing where they can find more information. So your website, your social media channels are great places to keep updated and to point to people like news media, customers, and other constituents of your audience too. And so then just some of the key components that we looked at on the very first slide, just coming back to this, these are best practices that you should always keep in mind and as part of your crisis communications plan. So obviously tell the truth. That seems fairly obvious, but sometimes the truth is hard. And so This is something that, I put up here first and foremost. Transparency is vital to your organization's credibility. And again, as you move forward through the crisis, telling the truth up front is going to set you up to minimize the damage that something like this can do to your organization. Again, knowing when to respond, given every situation is different. You need to carefully assess the situation and have a plan in place to respond. Don't respond too soon if you don't have the information, but also you don't want to wait too long and have those armchair spokespersons get out there in front of you. Again, dedicating a spokesperson. Again, we can't stress enough how important factual, accurate, and credible information is going to be in developing what those key messages are based on the information you're getting from the authorities and those who are leading the charge with crisis response and management. Again, right now that is San Juan Basin Public Health, the Colorado Department of Public Health, and then up to the national level, we have the CDC, and even on a global level in a pandemic like this that impacts every person in the world, the World Health Organization. And then don't write headlines for the media. And people always ask me, what do I mean by this? It's, I guess, a little confusing, but the language that you use can be taken out of context very easily by the media, which is no surprise. But, we had, for example, down here, the fire, during the 416 fire, the wildfire fighters were using this technique, back burning, and it looks really dramatic on camera because you have these flames that literally reach over 100 feet. And so the media were running with those photos, but they weren't explaining the whole story, that this was actually a technique that the wild firefighters were using to save homes and structures. So they were just right out there with these, I think the headline was "Fire of Epic Proportion." And they got that quote directly from someone that they were talking to downtown. So pictures and the language that you use with media can be used against you, and you definitely want to be careful with how you word things. And then finally, a picture does say 1,000 words. So that can work two ways, where we saw with the back burning, it made it look like the fire. I mean, the fire was definitely very bad, but the back burning was this technique that just made things look even more terrifying to scare people away from wanting to come here. On the flip side, what we did for Visit Durango, social media in the past decade has just emerged as this fantastic tool. It's easy for people to update. They don't have to go into the back end of their website or have their web developer help them each time they need to make an update. It's very quick and easy to update. And it also allows you to show photos of what is actually happening here in real time. So as those backburn photos were being showed in the media, we were using Visit Durango's social media channels to take pictures and video and show people what was really going on here in real time. And that helped I think that social media helped us recover a lot faster from the 416 fire compared to the Missionary Ridge fire in 2002. We saw a lag in tourism for almost 2 years after the Missionary Ridge fire versus the 416. We bounced back, by August, we already had lots of people back in town. And we attribute a lot of that to social media, the ability to stay top of mind with people during that time. Our supporters were really out there, showing us their love, and people came back, especially from our neighboring drive markets, to support us. And we really attribute a lot of that to our ability to use social media during that time. It also helps you to, in lieu of having a spokesperson, you can use social media without having to identify somebody that you have to put forward. You can use social media as more of an anonymous channel to put that spokesperson content out there. It also creates a record. So, be careful as well of what you put out there, making sure that your message is not inflammatory or going to blow back on you, because it does, it does exist and live out there beyond spoken words. And then the traffic is instantly measurable, which is another great reason social media can be used during times like this. And then this is a slide that actually was prepared by Dr. Taylor up at the fort that I put in here because I thought it was just a great resource tool. So when we provide this deck after the fact, and it just shows tourism destination marketing organizations such as Visit Durango. This is just an example of what our role during a crisis is, given our town is, at least 25% dependent on tourism. We play a big role, obviously, in response when it comes to things like the 416 fire and COVID. So just to again reiterate, frequent and transparent communication, upholding your brand image. So putting those leaders in your organization out there to minimize the damage to the destination, which is what, we'll be working on after things settle down with this current crisis situation. And, the speed of recovery depends on maximizing these available resources. So we were really pleased that we did bounce back quickly after the 416 fire. And I think our community's response also played a big role in our ability to recover. So if you've lived here for a little while, we've seen that Durango is very well versed in crisis response and management, going back to 2002 with the Missionary Ridge Fire, one of Colorado's biggest wildfires in history, followed by the Gold King mine spill, the 416, which, we're not even 2 years away from the 416, and here we are in the midst of another crisis. And, the one thing you can count on with crisis is that they will continue to happen. They're not going away. So getting on, just being here for this crisis communications workshop shows that you're thinking in the right direction in terms of your planning and preparation. So kudos to that. And then just more about destination marketing organizations playing a role as a key influencer during disaster management. And that's all I have. I don't know if that was too short, but I wanted to leave some time for questions. So there you have it.
Thanks, Theresa. This is MJ from Southwest Colorado Disaster Assistance. So you guys feel free to ask Theresa any questions in the Q&A chat. We can get those answered. It's also recording on live, so you can go back and look at this. And then we'll also send your presentation, Theresa, out to everyone that joined us today.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if I can see the chat.
There should be a Q&A right down there on the bottom, but I can look at it too and tell you any questions that come up.
And I just stopped sharing my screen, so hopefully you don't see it anymore. No questions?
I have a question about those armchair quarterbacks that you were talking about. How do you effectively communicate with them to either collaborate and let them know the importance of crisis communication coming from the organization first? What is a
that's a really great question.
Skill?
That's a great question, MJ. Sometimes, we, especially with social media, we do respond to people, but you can really get yourself in a rabbit hole. Some people with social media and the internet, not to be insulting to anyone, but we have trolls, people that just love to stir up controversy on those channels. And so I have a rule of thumb that 3 responses, going back and forth with somebody like that, it's a great idea to have a community policy for some of those channels. If you do end up with somebody that starts using profanity, you just point to your community policy, and if they don't adhere to being respectful, then you can block them. And that's the approach I would take. So, again, you can't change people's mind. If someone's out there and they're providing, false information, we'd respond politely, do not get into an argument with these people. Just, thank you for your comments, being very polite. not, just not getting into it with them. 3 responses, and then I stop. We have some people on San Juan Basin Public Health social media that we see on there every day with, every time we post an update, they have 50 comments, and you just can't go down the rabbit hole. A couple of responses, doing your job, and then after that, just ignore it. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. And then one more question, just because attendees are from all over, like you represent tourism and you've worked a lot with local governments and have a lot of direction coming from different organizations. But some of these attendees and business owners might not have that coming from like the retail side or a service side. And maybe they don't know who to turn to, but they want to communicate what their organization or business is doing during COVID. Do you have a recommendation on how often people should or businesses should update their clients or their customers on what they're doing in reaction to COVID? Because it seems like right now everyone is sending out emails or doing this. And so just kind of from a communication professionalism that you come from, do you have any recommendations on how often people should be talking about COVID related to their business?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. It depends on, it's going to be different depending on what sector you're in. If you do own a restaurant that is doing takeout right now, for example, anytime there's a new order that comes from the governor or something changes in terms of, the amount of people that are allowed in the store, what precautions and safety measures, extra precautions and safety measures that you're taking. There's so much information flying around about COVID right now that normally I would say maybe a little bit less, but because if your business is open and operating and you need to assure people's safety, I would say getting out there, maybe not daily, but at least every couple of days to reassure people about what it is that you're doing to prevent infection spread and to keep their safety in mind. I don't think that you can over communicate right now in this situation because so much is getting lost in the shuffle. During the fire, for example, the way that we handled it for Visit Durango was we literally sent out those email communications every day during the thick of it when everything was closing. And then we tapered off as things started to get under control. Things started opening up again. We went down to just maybe a couple times a week and then to once a week after that.
Great. Thank you.
There are associations, for retailers. Again, now while we're all stuck at home, this is a great time to kind of find out who those people in your industry are, who those organizations are that can support you through a crisis like this, because, every industry has those levels of support and you don't have to go it alone. You can reach out to people in your industry, you can reach out to the city, to the county. All of these entities have what is known as a public information officer, or PIO. You may have heard the acronym. And those people their job is to manage crisis communications. So you can lean on the city and the county and other officials in your own community if you don't have those associations.
Great. And I'm just going to keep firing questions away until we get some more. But one more question, just to summarize for everyone listening. If you were a small business, and I know you kind of touched upon it in your presentation, but what would you do now if you were stay at home trying to recover? What would you do to prepare for future crisis communication? I know you said to have like some kind of written words ready to go, kind of have a plan in place. Like, what are some things that these small businesses can do now to prepare for future crisis communication?
Yeah, so the plan, who is your crisis communications team? We always recommend for the media spokesperson to have some media training, and that's not always possible for small businesses to pay for media training, but there is a wealth of information out there with videos and webinars. So I would find, personally right now, there are so many webinars and distance learning opportunities. I would do some self-teaching. I would identify what for my business, could potentially happen beyond a wildfire or something like that. For restaurants, especially coming out of this situation, what are they going to need to recover from this? And again, people are going to be really freaked out, especially for hotels and airlines and even restaurants to a degree about, getting sick and germs and things like that. So everything that you're doing to take extra measures, extra precautions, during this time, a lot of hotels are, because they're not operating at full tilt, they're using this time to do really deep cleaning. So making that, our biggest hurdle coming out of this recovery is going to be communicating what we're doing to ensure people's safety and getting that message across. So all the great work that you are doing to take these extra steps to clean and ensure people's safety right now, you're going to want to put that out there and communicate that to your customers. And with crisis situations, it's a fine line, because you don't, like, I wouldn't recommend during the fire that you go out and send an email blast to all of your customers that we have a fire here, because then you're kind of causing undue concern for some people who it may not even be on their radar. But with this situation, with COVID, it's going to be really important for certain businesses to be proactive about those measures that we're taking to ensure people's safety, not just visitors, but locals as well. I think you're on mute, MJ.
All right, there we are. Thanks for that. If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop it in the Q&A down below. But otherwise, thank you, Theresa. That was super informative. Really appreciate your decades of experience and sharing that in 30 minutes. That's pretty impressive. But to everyone else that wants to join for future marketing, free marketing webinars, I put the hyperlink in the chat there. You can go through for the rest of the month and into May and sign up for classes that interest you and your business. They're free. You just have to register with the Zoom link that's in each class description. So tomorrow, we also had another member of Visit Durango, Nick Kogos, who is going to teach the Google business. So yeah, Nick, I don't know if you're still on, if you want to talk a little bit about what that's going to be. Otherwise, you can surprise us and join us.
No, I'll just give a quick introduction. Yeah, it's going to be a class really on the basics of Google My Business, and then how it relates back to COVID, what you can do right now while everyone is working from home to update and inform your customers about what's going on with your brick and mortar. And that's all I got.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we can follow up with all the attendees on these links, and you guys can sign up. But thanks so much, and we welcome any feedback. This is a pretty new project, but I hope that it helps you guys out. So thank you, Theresa, very much. We'll send your contact information too, if that's okay, in this email.
Yeah, I put it in the chat as well. It's just Theresa@durango.org. If anyone wants to reach out about tourism or crisis communications or anything like that, give me a shout.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.